always done a challenge that was like email, but then there was usually like a live video component to it. And so I thought, well, I can still do the live component if I want to answer questions and just engage people. But wouldn't it be great if every single morning, along with their email, they just got an episode downloaded right to their phone, something that they could listen to? They didn't even have to open the email to do it.
All right, welcome back to another case study episode. We are so excited to have one of our OGs, Kendra Hennessy. You've done so much with Hello Audio. I'm beyond thrilled to get a chance to talk to you today. So welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. I realize like how long I've been using Hello Audio. Oh my gosh, it doesn't seem like it's been that long, but I have a lot of feeds inside Hello Audio because that's how often I use it. Use it for a lot of different things. I love it.
Oh, yeah. I love it. And then we'll come up with more ideas.
Yes.
That's even the better thing, right? It's like all of a
Exactly.
sudden we'll talk and be like, hey, did you ever think about doing this? This
Mhm.
is so much fun. Well, before we dive in, I'd love if you could just talk a little bit about your business and your business model so that everyone kind of listening can understand a little how, what you do and who you serve and kind of how your business is set up.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Kendra Hennessy. I'm the founder and CEO, which I like to think of CEO as just the chief everything officer. Because when you're a business, I
Nice.
have a
So
team of
true.
some people, but you really are doing everything. Here at Mother Like a Boss. And our goal really here is that I like to make house cleaning more doable for regular moms. And really, it's expanded even out there to all folks and families so that you spend less time tidying your space and more time enjoying your life. I owned a cleaning business for 11 years before I started this one. And what I saw was that I learned so many skills through cleaning other people's houses. And so many of us did not grow up learning life skills. We just didn't grow up learning any of the skills. I mean, a lot of the adulting skills, but even just the day to day cleaning and tidying and things that we think like we need to do as adults. But if no one sat you down and showed you how to use a vacuum, if no one told you how often to clean your sink, if no one told you that your dishwasher actually has a filter that you probably need to clean, it would make it work better. How would you know how to do that? So really at Mother Like a Boss, we're just all about making it very doable with all the imperfection. We're not about perfect curated homes. We're about living in cleaner homes that make us feel good and doing it in a way so that you're not spending your whole life cleaning. So that's what I do here at Mother Like a Boss. My business model is really set up with an online course from an online course perspective. That's how we've really done everything here is online courses and guides, a lot of digital guides, things that are really easy to consume for moms and families on the go. And of course, a lot of audio because for my audience specifically, even going back to before Hello Audio, most of my courses are audio because that's the way that most moms consume content. We just don't have time to sit there and like watch videos. I don't have time for that. So I know
Yeah.
my audience didn't either.
I love
Yeah.
this. Oh my goodness. I am such your ideal client. This is so, and I think I will say this as I've gotten older, right? And now that I have a family and my kids are a little bit
Yeah.
older, I don't think I realized how much peace of mind having a clean house brought me and how
Yeah.
much joy
Yeah.
it actually brought me. It's
Yep.
like how much I really appreciated it and also how much we never really taught as a child and potentially how I might be like repeating the cycle. Cause so funny story. It's when my kids were very young, they're older now, they went to daycare and they had these little toy irons.
Hmm.
And my children had no idea how to play with it because they've never seen an iron because I
Nope.
don't iron. Who
Nope.
irons it? I mean, they're
Nope.
like, what the heck is this? Like, they don't even know what this is. I love what you do. It is so important. And yes, audio for your audience
Yes.
is just so critical. So I'm curious, how did you first find out about private? Like, what was your first exposure to private podcasts where you thought, oh, I could use this in my business?
Yeah, I very specifically remember when it was. It was like late 2020, early 2021, because I think the first private podcast that I used, like when I signed up for it, was in like early 2021. And the way that I found out about it was through Emily Hirsch, because
Oh, yeah.
she did a private podcast and I followed her. And I was like, she was doing a challenge or something like that. And I was like, wait a second. She has a private podcast? Because I've had a podcast. I have had a public podcast since 2018. So I was like, wait, is this new technology? Because I have not heard of this. And this sounds really neat. And then I started to do research into it. And I knew Lindsay we were in kind of like a program together. And so it's like, oh, well, if Lindsay's running it, it's got to be pretty awesome. I was like, wait, this is such new technology. And so this is so cool. And so when I signed up for it and did my first audio challenge, I was like, this is the coolest technology ever because I love podcasts. I listen to podcasts. I love creating them. I just love the idea of being able to pop your headphones in and listen to something while you're doing something else. I've learned a ton from podcasts. And that was really the first time that I had heard about Hello Audio was from Emily Hirsch, just somebody else doing a challenge and me being like, this is so cool. Let me look more into this.
Oh, I love that, and you
Yeah.
have an amazing podcast already. You have an amazing public podcast, and we'll
Yeah.
drop that link down below
Oh,
for anyone
thank you.
that wants
Yeah.
to check that out. We'll make sure to do that. So your audience is familiar
Yeah.
with you listening to you on audio. So
Yeah.
it makes me think that maybe the first private podcast that you started to do, your audience was probably excited because it was
Yes.
another way for them to consume. Do you remember the first way you started using private podcasts in your business?
Yeah, the first time I used it was for a challenge that I did in, like, February of 2021, something
Wow.
like that. So it was a challenge, it was just a 5-day challenge, and I had never done audio for challenges. I'd always done a challenge that was like email, but then there was usually a live video component to it. And so I thought, well, I can still do the live component if I wanna answer questions and just engage people, but wouldn't it be great if every single morning along with their email, they just got an episode downloaded right to their phone, something that they could listen to. They didn't even have to open the email to do it. Like they could just, they missed the email, they still had that. And it went phenomenally. That challenge converted higher than I had done a lot of challenges and that converted at like 12%, which is
Wow.
astronomical for a challenge. Like I usually converted at 2 to 3% for a
Oh my
challenge on a
goodness.
good day. And I think a huge part of that was that people didn't even have to open their email for that. Like they just were able to get that episode. And then we just started using it for our challenges. Anytime we did a live challenge from then on, I always added in audio components into it so that every single day people had something in their ears that they could listen to along with anything that might be in the email, along with any task. Or if I had a pop up Facebook group that went along with it, it was all helping one another. But the audio component, I think, is huge. Having that just drop in the morning that people can listen to and they don't even have, even if they don't do anything else as a part of the challenge. I'm also a huge fan of the fact that people can get to know you really well in that audio versus just an email.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. For me, anytime I've helped anyone run a challenge, I mean, and the traditional, yeah, you've got the Facebook group and it's
Yep.
usually video or something. And for some people, they put it behind a login. You've got your like LMS or whatever platform you use. And there's always been a pretty predictable drop off rate
Yeah.
from day to day. Doesn't really
Hmm.
matter how long your challenge is, there's usually a drop off. And I've noticed what we've heard Hello Audio users say is when they added audio, their consumption definitely increased because they've just made it so much easier. So the
Yep.
drop off either wasn't as significant or wasn't there because people were always still listening, even if they never logged in or didn't love being part of a Facebook group, which is sometimes a sales objection. Sometimes when you're
Of
selling
course.
a challenge or whether it's free or paid,
Yep.
they don't love Facebook. Did you find that your consumption rates also went up based on just the ease of use of being able to listen to audio?
Yes, I noticed that from the get-go, and I still notice it to this day that
Oh,
whether
wow.
it's a free private podcast that I'm offering for a challenge, or I've even used them for webinars. I've used Hello Audio for webinars too, which has been great. But even in my paid stuff that I have, I noticed that a huge number, like the number has gone up significantly versus, say, like an audio lesson, even that I have because I use Thinkific as my platform.
Yep.
And so even just the number of people listening in the podcast. And it is 100%, I can guarantee that it is because it's right on your phone. You don't have to do anything. It just drops to you. And we all know that's the benefit of a podcast is you don't have to do anything for it. It's just there when it's why people say subscribe. It's the same reason I like YouTube. I know that's video, but it's if you subscribe to someone, I don't have to think about it. It's just there.
Yes.
And that's why I think it's so great. And I've had so many people tell me that podcast component makes it so much easier for them to consume the content.
Oh, I love that. No, and
Yeah.
that's even because it is a relatively new concept. I
Mhm.
mean, especially when we first started Hello Audio,
Yeah.
private podcasts weren't really a thing.
No.
I think they've become a lot more mainstream and more
Sure.
familiar to a lot of folks, but we still have some folks that think, well, my audience, maybe they're not podcast listeners,
Mhm.
or this is new tech, or are they going to get confused? And I think the ease and convenience, and I think it's relatively easy to pop something into a player. And there's desktop listeners too, but I'm curious with your audience. I know
Yeah.
they were already probably listening to your public podcast,
Yeah.
but did you have that positive feedback of, oh my goodness, this is a game changer for your audience? What are maybe some of the feedback that your audience members or your customers maybe gave you about the private podcast component that was beneficial for them?
Yeah, so I know that when we started to use it for our paid programs, because I had a course and I decided in, I don't know, maybe 2021 or so to add just a bonus to that. And the private podcast was a bonus. So I would, every now and then just put in an episode of just maybe something that wasn't necessarily a lesson, but more of just something I was thinking about, wanted to add it in there. Or if we did a call, because I was doing monthly calls for a while, I would take the audio of that and put it into the podcast form. And I found that from the get go, people were like, I love the private podcast. I have not had one single person be like, I don't like the private podcast. Like,
Oh,
it's
wow.
just, it's so great because people love that they can just have that in their ears, like whenever it comes out. And even if you don't have it on a regular schedule, even if you don't have one episode that comes out a week, if you have it as a part of a paid program, it can just be like, hey, I might drop 2 a month, I might drop 5 a month, but it's all extra. It's all something that extra that people get if you're using it as a bonus. And then if you're using it as your course material, it's great because they don't have to log in to get it, which,
Yes.
even with the platforms that have apps, if you're not logged in for a certain amount of time, like it still logs you out. You still have to log back in. Like, I noticed that about all of these apps. I'm like, right, but I still have to log back in. So it's not that much easier than doing it on a desktop. But I have had nothing but positive feedback. We have a low cost membership that we started this year, just as kind of an addition. It's very simple, very easy, just something that they get like cleaning calendars every month. And I didn't want to do monthly calls. I was like, this is a low cost thing. I don't want to have to do the calls. And I also don't want people to have to feel beholden to coming to calls. But I still wanted to be able to answer questions and provide value. And so I heard Mariah Kaz talking
Yes.
with you guys about how she uses it for coaching calls. And I was like, she's a genius. I love Mariah. I'm going to use that idea. And that's what I did. I set up a Google form and I said, when you're in here, you can ask questions in the Google form. And then I just sit down and batch record episodes. Sometimes they're only 3 minutes long because it's just a quick answer. And then I put that on the private podcast. People are obsessed. They're
Love
obsessed with
that.
like, they just get their questions answered, but it's not, they don't have to show up to a call. They just have it answered and it's in a podcast. When I heard Mariah Cost say that, I was like, that's genius. I'm going to steal that.
Genius. Yeah,
Yeah.
and async for you too, because that
Yeah.
makes I mean, it's I think everyone wants to show up more and connect with their audience, and yes, that's
Yeah.
important, and it gives us energy, and we love
Hmm.
our people, and being able to serve people asynchronously
Yes.
is important for them too. I
Yes.
mean, we're all busy, it's very difficult. I'm sure you serve people across multiple
Yep.
time zones, which is it can be challenging to have a time that's convenient for everyone, and like
Yep.
you said, I think people feel pressured because it comes with whatever they paid for. So they feel
Yeah.
like if they don't go, they may not be getting the whole, value out of it. It's the stories we tell ourselves and the
Of
sales
course.
psychology of things. But being able to do that is amazing. I,
Yeah.
I love that. I am also really curious because when you said that you're using it for webinars as
Hmm.
well, I want to dive into that a little bit
Sure.
if you don't mind,
Yeah.
because that's something that I've had people consider, but I think there's this weird gosh, marketers, we always kind of say marketers ruin so many things sometimes, but like, it's
We
like
sure
the
do.
pressure to do, we totally do. But yeah, they do. And I think that it's this pressure of, well, I'm supposed to be doing a webinar this way.
Yeah.
And it's this fear of trying to change it up. And I'm curious about your decision to move away from maybe a traditional webinar because I hear people do it and I'm like, but no one loves it. No one loves doing it. And no one really
Yeah.
loves going to it, which I think is just funny in and of itself that we continue to use this model and no one loves it. But
Yeah.
I'm curious about your decision to move to audio And then I would love for you to walk us through kind of the decision process, what that looked like for you, and then the results that kind of came from it. Because I think this is a new concept for a lot of people that they want to try.
Yeah. So I've tried it a couple of different ways. One of the ways it's actually worked for me the most is sort of a hybrid where it's still a live webinar in the traditional sense.
Okay.
However, when they sign up for the webinar, I give them a link for the private podcast. Like that's what they have. And I already have 2 to 3 little mini episodes in there that introduce me to them, introduce the concepts of the webinar. And what I found works the best is using those like first intro episodes there that are short and sweet, so it's not taking up a lot of their time, almost to bust their objections before the webinar.
Yep.
Like, it's like a way to kind of introduce myself, the business, the model that we're, using and what they can expect from the webinar and everything, but also then to bust through some of their objections beforehand. And then after the webinar, I put the audio from the webinar onto Hello Audio so that they can
Yes.
listen because yes, there are things that I showcase maybe in a webinar that are visual, but I'm talking the entire time. I'm talking through it. So they could easily just listen if they wanted to. And then after, I can do sales follow-up audios where I'm following up about like
Yes.
maybe FAQs about the course that I'm selling and things that you would do in an email sequence. Like I'm doing that in an email sequence as well, obviously, but it's a secondary is having it in the audio form. And that has anytime that I do a live webinar, which I call a workshop because like my audience doesn't know usually what webinars
Yeah.
are,
We can't use
like a
webinar
workshop.
anymore.
No, no, it's kind of been commandeered too, and people don't want to come to webinars. So I call it a class or a workshop. But what I don't do as many live of those anymore, but every time I do, I try to add some kind of audio component to it because I think that it really allows people to get to know me before they even come to the live class. And then also they get the audio version of that. If they feel I think that it helps them get over the objection of like, I have to show up to this thing live. I have to watch it. I have to sit down for 90 minutes and watch this thing. Kind of eases that by saying, like, hey, if you're going to get a replay, it's going to not only be in a video form, but you can just listen to it here. And what I found is when looked at my numbers, the numbers for people listening to the podcast episodes was higher than the people watching the replay. So that's huge. Because the more people that are listening or watching, the better. And it was also a great follow up, a way to follow up in addition to an email sequence. And I found that just works. It works really well for us. And then what's great is you can make your private podcasts, you can make them scheduled or dripped. They can be live. And then you can also expire them. So if it's a free
Yes.
thing, you don't have to if you're worried about that, you can say, hey, there is an expiration date to this. There is some urgency there. And then you can just archive it. And then you don't have to, then that's it. So
I
it's worked
love
really well.
this. Oh
Yeah.
my goodness. So a couple questions, couple
Yeah.
follow-up questions, because so the entire concept of pre-framing the workshop webinar, like showing up live, is huge. And I
Yeah.
think the people that do that well are the ones that have the best results with those workshops, with those live events, right? I
Yeah.
think it's because a lot of times, if you think we've all registered for webinars, workshops, and we show up cold, and that first 10 minutes is rough
Hmm.
sometimes because you're like, all right, why, do I need to be here? But instead, what you've done is now you've taken the pre-framing and you've given people a reason to show up,
Yes.
which I think is huge. And even if they can't make it, because I think given your audience and just given your brand values and just you as a person, you understand that your audience is busy and you're respectful of their time, which is different than sometimes that we see other people, other marketers, other companies take the stance of like, if you're not showing up live, then you don't care. And it's a
Yeah.
little bit of like shame based marketing
Hmm.
or like fear based marketing, which it's not going to be our people, right? It's not going to
Same.
be them. Like we need to make things easier and convenient. But I love that you're giving people the reason to show up. You're giving them more, either getting excited about that content that's going to drop, which of course means that your consumption rates are going to go up. And this
Right.
content is designed to be consumed.
Hmm.
That's the whole point of why we put it together. We put heart and souls and, all this effort into it. So I'm assuming that with that audio, it also increases the conversions on the back end for whatever you're selling. because more people get to hear from you and they get to hear what it's all about. Is that true?
Yes. Yeah, we definitely and I feel like when we were first starting, I didn't do as good of a job, I should say, of kind of keeping track of KPIs. And if I was to do some of the stuff over again from the beginning, I would have had like a separate link, the way I do for like ads versus organic, where it's like a separate link that is just for the podcast. Cause I would have loved to have seen what the difference is. And it's a matter of duplicating a page. You can do it so
Yes.
easily. So I wish that I could see even deeper as to who was coming right from the webinar versus like from the private podcast. But even just the numbers alone are higher and the listen rate is higher. And I'm also I'm a long game person. So I also look at the long game of if I'm getting someone to sign up for this workshop and they're listening to these private podcasts, even if they don't buy there, have I done a really good job of nurturing them and showing them what Mother Like a Boss is about and what I can help them with? If yes, then they're going to stick around. They're going to go listen to my podcast. They're going to maybe sign up for another free thing that I have, or they're going to follow me on Instagram or TikTok or something like that. And so I've always been I learned a long time ago in my cleaning business, like if you're going to foster relationships, then it needs to be for the long game. And so many people are in for like just the really quick wins. And I think what audio does is it kind of combines both, where people are getting to know you really fast, but they're getting to know you in a way that then they know if they want to stick around, like for the long haul. So they'll keep listening. And I've had people even on my regular podcast say that they've listened to my podcast for 4 years and then finally bought something because maybe they just weren't in a place with their budget to, but they loved
True.
that they were able to consume all this free stuff. And then they were like, oh man, like I can finally buy your course. This is great. And so I think private podcasts are fantastic for that, for free
Oh, I
stuff
love
because
this.
yeah. Yep.
This is awesome. I love the fact too that not only are you making it easy to consume, you brought up something important that
Sure.
a lot of people don't think about because, in the marketing world, it's like, oh, urgency, right? We got to make
Uh-huh.
sure you got urgency. And the fact that you can expire or make podcasts available for a limited time. So
Sure.
sometimes we'll call them pop up podcasts and whatever that looks like. It does provide a sense of urgency
Mhm.
to consume the content because that content will go away at some point. And so, it's not the, "Hey, you have 15 minutes to make a decision"
Right.
type of urgency, right? But it is the, "Hey, we've given you maybe access for a week," or have you tried do you notice that that makes a difference if you have tried that strategy of the kind of putting that expiration date on it so that people are a little bit more, I guess, attentive to making sure they get through the content before it expires?
Yeah, I always find that having any kind of like workshop or even the private podcast challenges, having them expire for me is really important. And I know that there's a lot of talk about, urgency and the ethics of making people feel like they have to do something in a certain amount of time. But the truth is that none of us would do anything if our feet weren't to
True.
the fire sometimes. Like none of us would take action unless there was a reason to. And I think that there's a really safe way that we can do that with our audience, and that is with providing them with the content for an amount of time that feels really good, not just for us, but for them. And so for me, yeah, it is usually about a week because I like to give people enough time in my audience to get through a weekend. Maybe they
Yes.
can't
Yep.
listen to that during the week, but they can if it's a weekend. I also get a lot of people and I don't know how it is in like the B2B industry. Maybe it's a little bit different, but in the B2C, I get a lot of people that are like, I get paid on Friday and I want to wait
Yep.
until Friday to buy this because I just, with my budget or something. And so I always take that into account. I don't think everything needs to be like, if you don't make this decision in the next 15 minutes, then clearly you don't want it.
Right.
That's the way that it is. Some
That's
people need some
insane.
time to think. They just need some time to think about it or come back to it. And not just are they going to buy, but even the content itself, giving people a
Yes.
little bit of time to consume that, but also noting that I heard this many years ago when I first started. Something that's free, it's free to the end user, but it's not free to the person creating it. We all know that. And you're not paying with money, but you are paying with your time. So there is currency there. And so you by it being free for money, it's not free for your time. So you do have to find the time because it is going to go away.
It's so
It is going to
true.
expire.
And I think with audio, what I've seen is that because it is audio, it unlocks all the hours of the day that they're not sitting at the screen. And so
Yes.
if you think about giving someone an amount of time to consume, maybe it's an hour or two worth of content, depending on what it is. If it's the workshop, that's the audio form or a challenge, like, all the episodes together. But when you think about the amount of time, the pockets of time you're giving them to listen to that now, where
Yep.
otherwise they wouldn't. It would have been maybe more challenging for that individual to go through all of that content if they had to be sitting at a screen or sitting at a desk to be able to do that. And I think by just making it easier and more accessible, it actually does feel really good to someone. And I like expiring feeds and giving
Mhm.
people deadlines that are reasonable. And we also take weekends into consideration for that exact reason, because a lot of times we're busy and we might have a little bit of extra space
Right.
over the weekend to be able to sit back and relax and maybe catch up on something. So we do the same thing as well. But I do think with audio, it does make it more accessible and more likely that people will go through the content, which
Yeah.
I really like as well.
Yeah. Agreed.
I love that. Okay, so I'm curious. You've done so many things. I know you've got podcasted versions of your course as
Mhm.
well. So there's a lot of different ways you're using private podcasts. Is there one way that you've kind of been, maybe it's in your back pocket and you've been thinking, or maybe you've brainstormed and thought, you know what, I think I'm going to try this. Is there something that you've been sitting on? You're thinking, maybe I'll give that a go in terms of using it?
Well, I didn't until right before we hit
Yep. Yeah.
record, you gave me an idea. And then I was like, how have I not thought of this? So I'm going to say that cause I was like, okay, I've used it for challenges. I've used it for webinars. I've used it for my paid stuff. Like, I don't really know how else. Like, I'm just happy with the way I'm using it. And then, I said my main opt in is a quiz that I have. It's been super popular because it's really quick and it gives people really great results and stuff. And, you were like, "Oh, do you use a private podcast for that?" And I was like, "No." To say more things. And then you gave me the idea to, like, you could have curated answers, like, either a separate little podcast or different episodes that they get a link to from that. And I was like, "I know what I'm doing." Because
I
I
love
love
this.
that idea now, like, with 5 different results I already send them to I was saying that depending on your result from the quiz, I do have, like, "Hey, these episodes of the Mother Like a Boss podcast would be best for you." But I love having literal episodes that are curated, like, when they get the result of whatever they get the procrastinator, that I get to be in their ears being like, "Hey, procrastinator, so here are some things like the way you would a video on a landing page." But this way, again, it's just that extra little layer of something special that they feel like the whole point of a quiz is it lets people know that you know who they are. And so I'm like, that's take it to the team. That's what we're doing now.
I love this. Like, your quiz is so awesome anyway, right? Because it's giving people super valuable insights
Yeah.
into their style, into themselves. And then you're giving them these kind of like these tips, these insights of how they can then go take that new insight or no, new knowledge.
Yeah.
And now they're going to be able to take that information and just have it in their pocket and take that with them, which I
Yes.
really like that opportunity for them as well. So that's super exciting. I can't
Yeah.
wait to see
We're gonna
that.
try that next.
I love it. I love it. So I know we have people listening to this that are thinking, all right, so I could see private podcasts. And if you had to go back, knowing what you know now, what
Mm.
advice would you give someone who may not have, and maybe they're not a podcaster, so they may not even be familiar with this space, but what advice would you give someone who's maybe thinking about using private podcasting in their business?
I would say try it with something really small. It has never been easier to do podcasting. It really has never been easier to do so many things. I hear the same thing from people that are like, well, I don't know how to use Instagram. I'm like, it's never been easier to just get on your phone and make a video because everyone's video quality is, and the same with audio. Do you have a pair of headphones with a microphone on it? You can make a private podcast. Like, you don't even need the full setup if you don't want to. You can just it's interesting that with the advancements in technology, I actually think many of us are more forgiving now of certain things because
Yeah.
we just want the content. Like, we're cool if it's not perfectly curated and edited. It's like we're just looking, and the software and hardware is so much better. So it's easier to do. So I would say try something small, give it a try, and also poll your audience and see what they would most want to hear. And I think a lot of us sometimes think, my audience wouldn't want X, but then you ask them, and sure enough, they do. So if you have even like any kind of free offer or a workshop or anything, is there a way that you could turn that into something that's like a quick 5-part series? And they could be like 5 minutes a piece. That's what's great about audio is that it doesn't even have to be long. I've been a part of courses that I've spent a lot of money in, and it has a private podcast component on Hello Audio, and some of the episodes are like 6 minutes long. And I'm like, "This is perfect. This is exactly what I needed. I didn't need to sit and watch a 30-minute long workshop.
Oh,
I
no.
just needed 6 minutes of this person's very clear, like, activity for me to do or truth bomb. That's it. That was worth it right there." So, short and sweet too.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the short part of it is and I think the ease of being able to swap out audio. If I was gonna test anything, please don't make me do PowerPoint slides or Google Slides or Canvas
I
slides,
know.
or the thought of doing that just makes me wanna not do it. And so being able to just sit and record and
Yeah,
swap that out if I mess up, or swap it out if I
absolutely.
don't like it, or just feels like the ease and convenience. So I love that advice. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I'm so excited that you were able to share this. Thank you so much for being here. I do have one final question that we
absolutely.
ask all of our guests.
Sure.
And that is, if there was a private podcast with your life's ramblings,
Mm.
what would it be called?
I gave this some thought, and it would be called "I Could Do This All Day" because it's Captain America's saying, and I'm a huge MCU nerd.
Yes.
So, the fact that it's one of my favorite things that is said in all of the MCU is just, "I could do this all day" because it's so Steve Rogers. It's just no matter how many times he gets hit, he's just, "I don't care, I'll do this all day." And also, I like to talk. So I feel like once you got me going on a subject, I could do that all day. I could talk all day about that. If
It's
I had
so
a life
perfect.
ramblings podcast, it would be I could do this all day. And some of the stuff I might ramble about is Marvel stuff. So it would all work out in the end.
Oh, I would love that. I would be there for that all day, for sure. Like I've seen every single movie
Oh,
with
yes.
my kids. So
Yeah.
yes, I absolutely love that. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for
Thank
sharing this. We're going to
you.
make sure all of the links are
Awesome.
in the notes. So
Perfect.
definitely want to make sure you check out that quiz because
Yeah.
it is awesome. And we'll make sure we have links to your podcast as well so that people can
Cool.
listen in. But thank you so much for being here, and thank you for being one of our OG members.
No, thank you so much.
And there you have it, audio heads. Another episode of Launch Your Private Podcast is in the books. I hope you're leaving today feeling even more ready to amplify your voice and connect with your audience in meaningful ways. The adventure continues in our next episode with even more insights, strategies, and inspiration to help you along your own private podcasting journey. Of course, make sure to check out helloaudio.fm to start your own private podcast. And remember, you've got amazing content that needs to be heard. So let's turn the volume up. Until next time.